Hello, and welcome to the Z3 Project podcast. I'm Amitai Fraiman, the founding director of the Z3 Project, and I am so glad you're here with us. This show is where we bring together leading voices from across the Jewish world to wrestle with some of the biggest questions shaping our people's future, questions of identity, politics, culture, and community. It really mirrors what we do at our conferences. We have ours coming up in November 9th, and we have 8 more planned throughout the year across the continent. Other communities are leading their own conversations, but this podcast is really a way to capture that element and bring it to many more people on this platform. And today's conversation is one that feels both urgent and inspiring. Really, it was heartbreaking and heartwarming. The state of LGBTQ plus life in Jewish communities in the U.S. and in Israel. In this moment in general, there's growing polarization, there's shifting norms, deep challenges in both countries. And what does it mean to belong, to advocate, and dream about a more inclusive Jewish future? And I want to think of something in particular in this moment in the war in Gaza. This community finds itself being pushed out from both spaces. On the one hand, they're being accused of pinkwashing. We'll talk about that as well. And on the other hand, they're being tokenized often. And they're really a community that is being marginalized, is finding itself even increasingly so. And that means that we need to be more aware and mindful of what that means. And to really understand this better, I'm joined by 2 exceptional leaders. The first is Asher Gellis. He's the founder and CEO of JQ International. For over 2 decades, Asher has been a driving force in creating groundbreaking programs and services that have transformed Jewish life for tens of thousands, pushing our communities towards greater LGBTQ plus inclusion that will resonate for generations. And from Israel, we're very, very honored to host and welcome Hila. She's the chair of the Aguda, Israel's pioneering LGBTQ plus association, now marking 50 years of activism. It's unbelievable. And she's a respected leader and a proud mother of twins. Hila has spearheaded advances in civil rights and legislation, and today stands as one of the most prominent voices for Israel's LGBTQ plus community. And it really is remarkable to hear both of these wonderful individuals' perspectives on the challenges and opportunities that are facing us. And so together with them, we'll dig into the realities facing the community and LGBTQ plus Jews here, both in the U.S., I say here because this is where I am, and in Israel. The progress and the setbacks, the impact of the war and political polarization, and the tensions and opportunities in how our communities connect across the ocean. We'll also ask what kind of Jewish future they imagine for the next generation and what still gives them hope. So thank you again for joining us. And if you find this conversation meaningful, please follow us on social media. We have more episodes of podcasts. We have recorded sessions from our previous conferences. We have events online. We're publishing books. There's a lot happening in the Z3 Project. So I invite you to follow us, share this episode, share our links, join our email list to stay informed of what's going on. So thank you again for joining us. This is the Z3 Project podcast, and I'm Amitai Fraiman, the founding director of the Z3 Project. Enjoy this episode and your day. Hi Asher, hi Hila. Welcome to the Z3 podcast. I am really excited about this conversation, and I'm really honored to host the 2 of you on this Z3 podcast episode.
Blessings.
We're thrilled to be here.
Good. Yofi. So, I mean, at this point, I've introduced you to the audience. They know a little bit about you and your work. So we're going to jump right into it because, these conversations are timed and we want to be efficient with it. So, we've been going through a lot as a people. That's an understatement, I'd say. I don't know how much of an understatement of the year, of the decade or more. But it's been rough all around. And in this conversation, which is, in a way to help shine a light on other elements of our community that people might not be aware of, as much as we think they might, maybe should be, is the experience of the LGBTQ community and how they are going through this experience. Because, I as someone who follows the news almost religiously, there's all kinds of obvious things that are going on, but I am much more curious to hear about it from your perspective, right? And you're each sitting in a different place, come from different, experiences, obviously, that led, of your life and your context. And so that's really the purpose of this conversation, to kind of elaborate around that and see what we would like to share with our audiences of something that they don't typically come across or don't know enough about. So that's why we're here. So really, thank you again for joining. So we'll cut right to it. The first question, we'll go from there. It might seem a little bit jarring just because of there's not a lot of preamble, but I know that you will handle it well. So How would you describe, and as we go through, sometimes Asher will answer first, or Hila, whatever moves you, don't worry about it. It's all good. So, how would you describe the current realities of the community and the LGBTQ Jews in your own respective communities? Right, Hila, you're in Israel. Asher, you're in the U.S. And maybe shine a light on what you're seeing, what you're going through in this particular moment.
Sure. We'd be thrilled to share. I can tell you that in 2 decades of doing this work, this is a very different time than I've ever experienced before. Since October 7th, we've seen a sharp increase in not just anti-Semitism in general to the community at large, but we've also noticed that through many of our trans and non-binary community members, the level of anti-Semitism has been exponentially higher for them and what they've experienced. They who enter into their communities are often being asked to make statements either against Israel or anti-Zionist in some way or another, and whether Israel is priority in their identity or not, this expectation is being made of them, and they're finding themselves constantly being forced out of their communities. The trans and non-binary communities have very limited safe space to live in and to operate in and to experience community in. And for them to be shunned by their trans and non-binary community members for not making anti-Israel statements has been a very heartbreaking thing that has sent many of them into crisis. And our helpline that supports LGBTQ Jews has seen a 67% increase in crisis calls from the trans and non-binary community since October 7th.
That's terrible. So you're saying that in general, it's already a limited space, and now it's become even increasingly so in this
Yes,
moment.
it has. The level of isolation is just unprecedented for a community that already felt isolated and already felt targeted. And with this political climate here in the United States, their identity is even further the subject of politicization.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna talk later about this I guess compounding effect or intersection of of here and there, and there's two sides of that coin. In other words, of what it looks like from Israel, what it looks like from here is what I mean when I say two sides of that coin. But we'll get there because there's a lot to uncover there in that conversation. But I do want to hear from Hila's perspective.
I think it's fascinating. It really is the source of the conversations, how the winds that are blowing in the States are affecting Israel as well. But as in the community in Israel, we've had a very, very difficult 4 years now since the beginning of the judicial U-Haul. I mean, October 7th met the LGBTQ community in survival mode from the get-go, because we had a coalition that was formed in the government that completely and openly stated that they're coming for amendment of the bills that allow us free life and cutting off our budgets and so on and so on. So we spent a whole year on the streets. October 7th was supposed to be week 40 of the protests against the judicial U-Haul, and instead it met us in a state of utter war that I have never seen before in my life. Yeah. So the emergency situation really sent us into depths of emergencies that we've never met. I mean, people who were evacuated from their houses, we're talking about tens of thousands of people, and with them are kids and grown-ups who were thrown back into the closets. I mean, imagine that you were a family of 5 living up north or down in the settlements, and you're evacuated, but you're evacuated to a hotel room with your entire 5-people family in one room. Zero privacy. You don't have your surroundings that you're used to around you. So people were very much in distress. We had a near collapse of the system that we operate as a hotline and social workers that were working. And it took a few months to actually just get ourselves together. I myself was in a party down south. A lot of the people from the organizations were all around the country when everything started. So when we got to the point where we cannot be in emergency mode, we just started to kind of get the pieces back together. And I think what's fascinating with what's happening now, and actually from November, when the protests in the States started against the action that Israel is taking in Gaza, the first hit that the LGBTQ community got in Israel was because of Queers for Palestine, the queers in Israel were marked as double crossers, which is completely insane. That's what the far right used to attack us here.
Yeah, that's crazy. You're both describing first of all, an immensely painful moment, and one that's already immensely painful for many. And what's interesting, I find, and Hila, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm curious to hear if you can maybe elaborate a little bit on this, and then you as well, Asher. But in terms of in Israel, I remember very early on there was you're talking about the connection between the judicial overhaul and how that influenced the public discourse. And then, of course, we know that there are people who are serving, right, who belong to the whole range of experiences. And there was that heartbreaking story of a couple that one of the partner was killed in action, fighting off terrorists, and then the country couldn't really figure out how to recognize their status. So you're getting that's like the pincer move. There is, on the one hand, the country is expecting you to show up fully, and serve and carry the burden of citizenship in Israel, and on the other hand is stripping away a lot of the protections and the ability to do so freely outside of those constraints. And in the U.S., it's a little bit different, obviously, but there is a moment. It feels like there's one side of the community is pushing you out into where you are trying to find comfort, and then that community too is pushing you out. And I can't imagine that the exponential amount of pain. So is that feels reflective and accurate, Hila, from the Israeli perspective, and Asher? Yeah.
Yes, definitely a very painful, layered pain upon layered pain for all of us.
Yeah. So that's how the wars, I think, at least from my superficial understanding, that's an external impact. That's where it shows up externally. What are you seeing? You both mentioned a rise in the crisis hotline use and kind of that. But what else are you seeing that the war is impacting internally within the community itself?
I think if I'll talk about Israel, I think there are a few things that are happening. One of them that we've really waited to see how they settle because emotions were so high in the first few months was the way that people's opinions got to extreme places. I mean, some were painting it as a complete and utter fail of the government's policy over the last decade, and we should be thriving for peace. And if we're not amplifying voices for peace enough, this is what we're getting. While the other side was going completely for this is a war of existence. We cannot live even next to each other. And I think it's just an amplified voice of the entire Israeli community right now, in a whole. But when it comes down to the LGBTQ community, if you have right-wing thoughts, you can't even express them because we have trouble even having a discussion like we are now. If we don't agree on things, it's a lot harder to do so. Everything is extremely emotionally charged.
Yeah,
and we're not getting...
Yeah, it's more polar. So people have to pick a side. Yeah. Can you? You ended there, and it feels like you're going to say a little bit more. And I want to ask you to unpack that more. What in terms of like if internally politically, there's also an expectation of alignment in a certain way.
True. I mean, traditionally, if we talk about human rights, the parties that are holding the flags of human rights in Israel policy are left wing. Right. And left-wing parties are not into or support wiping out Gaza, transferring all the citizens, and having military control over it. Right. But the right wing, in a way, the extreme right wing is, though the right wing is extremely against the LGBTQ community's existence. And they even showcased it before the war. So a lot of people don't have a political home. And that's another crisis that we need to deal with right now. Right. We call it the sane right, which we don't have. Right. But even just wanting to make a space for these conversations to kind of try and unpack the sentiment, to try and speak from our heads and not only from our hearts that's been bruised, we don't have a lot of good examples for that.
Yeah. Asher, how are you seeing this play out here in the States?
Well, I mean, I can think internally about our community, who's feeling a sense of trauma for everything that's going on, but I can also tell you that it's happening from within our own community as well. The sort of cancel culture mentality is definitely rising and bubbling up constantly. I think the expectations that people will align politically in a certain direction are very hard and nuanced. The JQ community is has very many different disparate political opinions and beliefs and levels of conservative versus, progressive, and we not we're not a monolith as a community. And there is that external expectation that we are, but we're not on the inside. And we're constantly experiencing, even from the inside, folks who don't want to be around people who don't agree with them 100% politically, which is not realistic and also not something that we're going to police. We try to create a safe space for people, regardless of how they feel and believe and where they find themselves politically, to come and join us and to be in community and to also respect others, whether or not they agree politically or not, that we created a safe environment. So while we've seen a huge uptick of new people wanting to get involved in the work that we're doing, we've also seen some people step away because the lack of, specific alignment to whatever they believe within their specific lens on the situation in the world or here domestically.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that complicated. I mean, that really does mirror or graft on, not surprisingly, of course, right, into the broader conversation. Even our work itself, that's exactly it. People, for some reason, are led to believe that they're going to surround themselves with people who think and experience life exactly the way they do. And if that's not the case, then they don't know how to cope. And I think that the actual, and I wonder, Hila, your experience, because this is my experience about Israel, and sometimes I worry that I'm too naive, but at least I still think this is somewhat true, is that in Israel, because of we'll call it the forced proximity that's born out of sovereignty. In other words, the idea that they live together, right? The crazy uncle that we talk about in the U.S., you meet him once in Thanksgiving. In Israel, it's every Shabbat dinner, right? And so, like that close. And by the way, crazy is a matter of perspective, right? Like, someone is calling any one of us crazy, and we're calling that same. It doesn't matter, right? But the point being that because of that forced proximity, with all the tensions, there is a level of resilience. I hope, to perspectives. I mean, if you look at the news, it's separate, but in the day-to-day life, that is actually more robust than I think in other places where there isn't forced proximity. So so I want to hear, if you think that's true. Asher, how does that play out here as well?
Well, first of all, I think it's immensely true. And I think that's one of the core reasons that the gay struggle as a movement was so successful in Israel. I mean, everywhere you look, you have the gay uncle or the lesbian or the trans or the bisexual on the table around you. So you can't hate somebody you know so well. And that's that's how we got so far, because we're so intertwined with each other. I do think, though, that the last 4 years people have started to be a lot further away. It started in 2019 with the rush of campaigns. We had 4 elections in a row, and only the 5th was a calling one. Another media channel, which is the way to silo communication and opinions through people. I mean, I'll share personally, my mom watches news on Channel 14, which is far right. And we agree basically on nothing. But when she started watching Channel 14, and it's been almost 2.5 years now, she also stopped talking about politics with me. She will not discuss it with me anymore. And that's a turning point. So when we stop talking, but we still coexist, because she's my mom and I see her pretty much every other day. I love her. She's insane, just like you said.
I didn't say, don't get me in trouble with your mom. Yeah, I didn't say that.
We're all someone's crazy, sir.
Yes, that I will say. Yes.
But once we stopped talking, and that got to be the norm, then we start having more trouble. And when we see it in surveys as well with the LGBTQ's acceptance percentage, when we survey the entire country, we see a decrease. and we see more violent cases, and we see attacks, and we see things that we've never seen before. And it's all kind of a pressure cooker that's starting to kind of overflow now.
Asher, how does it play out?
I think it's a little different for us here in the United States. Folks do have a little more separation from their families here, just by sheer fact that queer community members tend to move to specific cities to live in, to feel safe in their neighborhoods or in community. And so while I do know that I hear from community members that their family members are listening to different media sources than they listen to, and that has created a lot of conflict in the family. I think that there's just an ability to sort of put that in the back burner and not think about it for the lack of proximity. But I will tell you that it is something that is happening within the queer community at large, with the conversation around Israel and what's going on in Gaza and with Hamas, the Palestinians. It is lacking the nuance of understanding that it is a complicated situation. It's sort of an all or nothing. And so for many of our queer community members, as I mentioned earlier, the trans and non-binary, they are feeling very pushed out, and canceled. And it's heartbreaking. And while we can rejoice in the fact that we get more people coming to our Shabbat dinners because they want to participate, it's not for the best reason. And we're thrilled that we can be there to create community and to create support services and wellness services to help community members in crisis. It's very heartbreaking to see that it's coming from all angles.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's so I for a second I want to pause, just so we can also breathe, because I'm like feeling the energy go down because of the moment we are in, and that's fine. It just is. And this is not in any way to diminish or negate the fact that it's incredibly difficult. I do think it's important for ourselves and for our audience to hear, maybe, if there is, I hope there is, something a little positive before we'll go back to the other questions, I promise. But because we need to unpack, there's a lot that I have in my mind. But even something that you have seen that's positive. So Asher, you mentioned more people showing up, maybe for the wrong reasons. But okay, we say, what is it? מתוך שלא לשמה יבוא לשמה, right? From not wanting, for the wrong reasons, the right reasons will emerge later. So are there any positive developments that you're seeing, something that gives you a little bit of hope? I don't know if I can introduce that later, but yeah.
I mean, it goes beyond the fact that we've all these new people showing up at our programs. People are interested in more meaningful connections and getting involved in leadership opportunities. Folks have signed up to be a part of our advocacy training program and our speakers bureau. Community members are stepping up and wanting to volunteer, and in a way that I haven't seen in a while. I think in the early years when I did this work, folks would volunteer, we'll do anything you want. And then 10 years ago, it was like, I want to do this very specifically, and if you can't make it work, I don't want to volunteer. And now we've kind of returned to a place where people are like, just tell me what you need me to do. I really want to do something meaningful. And so that's a silver lining, I think. And I don't want to like belittle the reason why this is happening, but I think that knowing that there is a place for community members to turn to and to feel a sense of joy in a world that feels very dark is a very powerful thing that will have ripple effects in their identity moving forward.
Yeah, sure.
I definitely agree. I think, a lot of the last, until October 7th, there were a lot of question marks that were raised in Israel about what is a community. And are queers a community? Is the LGBTQ plus? Are you really a community? What makes that? And I think that we are seeing that when we need each other, we show up. We haven't had a percentage of civil engagement, and not just from people who are in the community, from mothers, from friends, from general human rights supporters. They're really stepping into the plate to help. They're stepping in to volunteer. They're stepping in to go to protests. They're doing everything, and they're involved. And we haven't seen this. This is what we've been gugging for the last 3 years before the war started. We needed people to be involved, and they were in desperate mode. And I think, it's like a pendulum. How bad does it need to get for people to get out of their chairs? And when times evolve and everything is getting more digital, people are not used to volunteering anymore. It's not the norm. It's not the norm to come and show up.
Right.
And it's getting back to that. And I think that's really what we need to take a huge leap forward.
That's good. That's great. So I want to ask something that has been kind of in the background of this conversation. Hila kind of mentioned it now, very specifically. Asher, you alluded to it, of course, several times. But I'm going to make a statement. I hope I get it right. If I'm wrong, correct me. But the question of, what is a community, right? And what makes it a community? That's kind of like the foundation of this next part I want us to kind of focus on. So it's not just about, okay, what makes a community? There's technical elements of that. That's fine. But I think that I'm curious, at least at first, to hear from looking at this group as if it's a uniform monolith, everybody thinks the same, and we know that's not true for a fact. It shows up. We talked about it internally, right? We said that that internally there's people that are on the right, on the left, observant, non-observant, whatever it is. It's great. But also externally, Hila, you mentioned earlier on, Asher, as did you, how in Israel, well, mentioned it separately. Hila mentioned how in Israel, when the beginning of seeing Queers for Palestine show up, how that impacted the conversation in Israel. And Asher, you mentioned through a different angle this thing of like belonging into a community, how you're being pushed out for your positions. And that's basically the question of, in many words, too many words, the question of either tokenization on the one hand or pinkwashing on the other. How does that kind of inform, how does that play out? How does that, if I want you to share your perspective, not mine, of how you're seeing it happen.
Do you want to start, Asher?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that was brutally honest. Okay, I'll
Sorry.
take this one.
Good.
I think the question marks of being a community will always be there. And I think if we won't have question marks, we won't be able to rise above them. When we assume things, they fall apart because we don't spotlight on them. And I'll give an example. There's been, and I'll use Asher's community to hop from. There's been so many talk in the States about the people who are trying to separate the T from the community. Drop the T, to hash out the transgenders and the queers and all that part. It didn't skip Israel. We had an op-ed posted in one of the biggest online gay channels that said that we need to drop the T. The transgenders are harming our struggle. They're not part of us. We need to take them out and move forward, and we'll be accepted. And we serve in the army, and we look like everybody else, and we just want love, and that will work. And the backlash that op-ed got was heartwarming. It was amazing, honestly. It made the distance that was always there in a way between the LGB and the T much, much smaller. Because we had to publicly opinionate, and we had to wipe out the drop the T. But we took a stand, and so many people took that stand that the transgender community in Israel saw that too. And that led us to join hands much closer. So I think a community is built on values, not on sexual orientation or not on gender. And I think that we're seeing it more and more. And that's why there's not much of a difference other than the topic between the LGBTQ struggle and the women's struggle and minority rights struggle. We're all intertwined because we talk values, and our values are the same. It causes trouble a lot of times within the community when we're not on the same opinions. But if we're able to talk about it and we get back to our core values, it makes us much closer as a community. So the more they challenge us, the more they glue us together.
So I agree 100% with Hila that the values is really the place to focus, and and really the underlying fabric of like what holds us all together. And I won't deny that I hear from the sides wanting to separate out and divide our community, but fortunately for us, it's not. I've never felt that it's a very strong current within our community. I do hear outliers making statements for which isn't always, in my opinion, an opportunity for a conversation that can lead to like education, opportunity to evolve your opinion. I myself didn't like using the word queer for the first 10 years I was doing this work, and now I love the word. And sadly, in American culture, the vocabulary carries a lot of weight, sometimes a little bit more than in other cultures, for good and for bad. But I will tell you that by and large, our leadership and those most invested in our community feel a common value, Jewish values of creating inclusive space, making sure everyone has a seat at the table, that we want to leave the world a better place than we found it, that there's a sense of Klal Yisrael. It is very much woven deep in the sort of psyche of our Jewish community. For those who are atheist, for those that are Orthodox, for those that are Jewish, Jew light, the values are what seems to hold us together more than anything else. And that has been a strong point for us in making sure our community really includes everyone and protects everyone.
That's great. So I'm going to call both of you out because you did a very, very good job answering the first part of my question, which is about the community side of it, but you beautifully evaded the second part of the question. But before we get to the second part of the question, which is about tokenizing and pinkwashing and that element of it, I do think it's worth taking a little bit of a detour for a second, really, like in what is this, for the uninitiated, right? What is the essence of the debate about separating out elements of the community as you see it? And I'm super interested because I like learning new things, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole too much. I just, because we mentioned it and use it as an example, it's going to be helpful for the listener to understand what exactly are the sides and what's the cases for and against it. Very, very briefly, if anybody want to just take that for a second.
Sure. What I can tell you is that we, as a queer community, are seen on the outside as we're othered, just to name that, just as the non-heterosexual or the non-cisgender community. We're seen as this sort of category as a lump sum. We're not a monolith, not just in political beliefs, but in our identity and the way our identities intersect with who we are. Someone's sexual orientation and who they're attracted to, who they love, is very different than someone's gender identity and how they see themselves in the world and understand themselves in this world. And those are not on the same sort of linear spectrum or circular spectrum, however you want to look at it. They're not the same conversations. Something that you hold in your heart is very different than something you hold in your mind, or something that you feel is very different than something that you are on the inside. So there's a lot of differences, not just between what it means to be transgender, cisgender, or gay, lesbian, bi, or straight. There's also, even within the LG and B communities, there's a lot of difference in our community. And I will say that the gay male population has, in my opinion, the most amount of power in our community, and they also have, in my opinion, the most amount of wealth. Now, while gay men in general make less than straight men, and lesbian women make less than straight women when looking at the studies, the gay men, just the same as straight men who have more power and wealth in the straight community, is similar in the queer community. And we see our trans and non-binary community members experience an unprecedented amount of job discrimination that we as gay and lesbians have experienced for sure. And I couldn't come out 20 years ago in my job, but it was also 20 years ago. So things are very different now, and the trans conversation has come to visibility at a much later period in comparison. And so those communities who have had more opportunity to advocate and have the vocabulary and the community to sort of work together to advance their cause now have more resources. Still insufficient, but more resources than other communities, and that causes a disparity. You go into the gay culture, and if you just very simplistically, you look, all the bars are pretty much for gay men. They're all designed for gay men, and gay men tend to spend more money on alcohol. They have more resources to do that. And as a result, we don't have many lesbian bars anywhere. So it's a terrible example, but it's such a simplistic way to look at it. And so there's a lot of nuance. And fortunately, the leadership in our community is aware of that, and they work towards creating opportunities to somehow, shrink the gap. But there's a long way to go, and we're just barely, seeing the tip of the iceberg and understanding that. Especially as a gay man, I can say that, or even in the queer community or the Jewish community as an Ashkenazi Jew in the United States. There's a sense of Ashken normativity. So it's not a monolith to our community. It's something you see across the entire Jewish community and the entire LGBTQ community.
But Asher, for the debate of separating the trans community out of it, right? When Hila says that someone in the community wrote a piece, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I can probably project my own thinking of internally and externally, but so what? Like, I want to hear it from you. You know what I mean? Like what is, like, because for the listeners, this might be the first time they're hearing. What do you mean they're trying to separate the LGB from the T, and what does that mean? Like, that could be.
Well, I mean, just if you look at the results of like who supports marriage, gay marriage in this country, the majority of people in this country support gay marriage. However, because of the politicization of like trans identity, you do not have most people in this country supporting trans community members. So if you decide to separate yourself out from the gay and lesbian community from the trans community, the gay and lesbian community has more rights, has more visibility, more acceptance. And why are you trying to poke a sleeping bear? Like, we've already made advancements in this level of our identity, and
That's a utility argument, right? Like,
sure.
right? Are there other? I again, like, I just, for clarity for the listener, because there's, what you understand is, like, of course, obvious for others might not be, and I want to go back to the main thing, but I do think it's important because the reason I think this is important is, A, so listeners are educated, but on a more important level, I think it also demonstrates that it isn't a monolith, and on top of that, I do think it informs this question of tokenization and pinkwashing ultimately, right?
Hmm.
Because if we can understand some of the internal stuff and what are the different forces at play, right? A more conservative mindset, generally speaking, on the world of, there's a binary, and so therefore this and that, whatever, that informs a lot of these conversations. I am, as an outsider, I see it, etc. This is why we're spending this for a second to really, like, hone in on, like, what are the sides of the conversation, and then we'll go back. This is just a detour, but we'll get there.
I think I can shine a bit of a light on this one.
Yeah.
I think, psychology-wise speaking, a lot of the gay men, I'll take Israel as an example, have been in struggle for more than 50 years here to get their rights, to get a sense of peace of mind. And it was a few years ago that the person who is right now chair of the Knesset, who is gay,
Right.
Stated in an interview that the gay struggle is over because now we're allowed to do surrogacy. And we were like, what? What are you talking about? He was seeing all the way to the edge of his own nose, in my opinion. He was completely shutting out all the distress, because people really want a good story by now. They don't want to be in struggle for so long. I think that's why people from within the community who hold that opinion are like, they're holding us back. There are differences between us. It's not the same. If we cut them out, we'll get to peace times and we'll have a better future sooner. That's the pro reasons. The cons, I don't even think I need to go through the cons. I can just say who's promoting these values. I can tell you, I told Asher this when we met the last time when he was in Tel Aviv. The center in Tel Aviv sent out a traditional, every year letter they send out to the U.S. Embassy in Israel to ask for their support for the Tel Aviv March. That didn't happen, and that's a different tragedy. But you know what the response was? It stated the embassy cannot support LGB efforts this year. They dropped the T. This is an intention that's coming from the U.S. administration, and it's coming from wings that are starting to promote these values beforehand to divide and conquer, nothing else. And it's coming from evangelists who are promoting these ideas. And the point is to really divide and conquer, because when they separate us into different twigs who are much smaller than the complete whole, it's a lot easier to harm us. And we've seen it happen in other countries as well. It's happened in Hungary and it happened in Poland. And we just need to open our eyes to this global village and see what's going on.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Thank you for both of you for elaborating that. So now I'm going to hold you though accountable to the other part of the question, which is the question of pinkwashing and tokenizing, which can be seen as two sides of the same coin. And from my perspective, I'll just say that what my challenge with some of these conversations, right, is that we are, and we don't have to open up this too much, but I want to share my perspective on this at least, is this idea that we are like this, the limitations of identity politics, right? When we pour ourselves into one element of our identity, and that is the only thing that we either ourselves or others expect us to live up to, or only see us through that thing, it's incredibly limiting. There's utility to it, and there's also incredibly limiting. My own very, very different example, I am, in the setting that I work, I am the only Orthodox rabbi. Okay, very different, of course, from everything we talked about. But I promise you that lots and lots and lots of people project onto me their own expectations in all directions, right? Oh, you're an Orthodox, straight, Ashkenazi rabbi with America. Like then I already know you. Then I already know everything about you. That they're right, and it's lazy. It's lazy, and it's also very damaging, right? So I think that the conversation of tokenization and pinkwashing as the two sides of a coin, right, is an interesting one, an important one to talk about. How do we what are we seeing? How does this influence all of it? The way we carry ourselves, the way the conversation is outside, internally. Yeah, that's where we're gonna go. So buckle up. No, but
So
I'm just buckling in because I'm emotional. So I'd really be happy if
So
Asher would start.
no problem, happy to. It's very real. The tokenization, the accusations of pinkwashing. I personally, and any of my staff and my community members, are being attacked on left and right through
literally and
awful.
figuratively.
I, I mean, through emails.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, look, listen, I don't want to talk about this because it's something that's affecting the entire Jewish community, but our security budget is through the roof and not what we expected to be spending. And we already feel that we're spending so much on security for our programs. Just in general, as a Jewish community, we have to do that. But I think that we are feeling we're feeling that cancel culture kind of butt up against us on the left and the right, and there's constantly it's almost like trolling. There are people who are seeking us out to sort of spar with us and see what kind of reaction we give, and it's coming from all sides. It's not one going in one direction. It's coming both sides of the bell curve. Are constantly challenging us and trying to police what we say and who we are and how we identify, and that affects that definitely is layered into the conversation around tokenization and pinkwashing. I am personally, I cannot speaking for my organization, but personally, I'm a very left-wing person. I support a two-state solution. I love
That's very
Israel.
left.
Sorry.
That's very left.
It seems like it's now super left.
It's a sad joke. It's a sad joke.
Everything is so extreme today,
I
isn't
know.
it?
Yeah.
Exactly. We receive comments from people, or on social media or emails before someone's willing to attend one of our programs to check to make sure we are, again, as I mentioned earlier, aligning with whatever they think is the way we are supposed to believe, feel, or think. And it's a lot of other people telling us who we are and how we think, and us trying to instead of being reactive, being proactive with the way we talk about ourselves, who we are, and what is important to us, instead of feeling constantly policed by others.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've been trying to start like that, decide how to start explaining this, but we're such an it's such a conundrum to call the gay community in Israel pinkwashing since October 7th. I mean, if we look at before, like I mentioned, with all the protests that we were involved in, we were against this government. We were against the fascist, racist part of the governments that were threatening minorities. And the Aguda and pretty much all 22 organizations from the queer community in Israel all have Arab branches, and we work with the Arab Israeli communities. We support the minorities who are coming in from the West Bank, who are asylum seekers, and we're the only ones doing that. And we had amazing cooperations with the organizations from the States and from across Europe. And then October 7th hit, and it is if nothing existed beforehand.
Yeah.
And every time we opened our mouths, it was like, you're pinkwashing. And the exact other thing was happening in the beginning. The first few months, my only statement was, please do not pinkwash Hamas. That is not the organization that deserves pinkwashing. There's a difference between innocent civilians and a terror organization.
Yeah.
And people could not get that very thin difference through their heads. And it was very frustrating. And I think there's a very famous case about the tank soldier that went in with the gay pride flag in Gaza. Did y'all see that? He went in, it was pretty much in the beginning, I think it was about November or December, that they went into Gaza and he opened up the gay flag. And he took a picture with it, and the IDF retweeted it.
Yeah.
I think that the IDF made a mistake by retweeting it. But I know that guy. And the reason that that guy did that is because it represents his values going into war.
Yeah.
He's going in with a flag that represents his values. And I'll tell you something more. If we wanted to pinkwash, we would have done so much. If we even talk about the hostages, it's just an impossible situation.
Yeah.
We had hostages who are from the gay community.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything. It's completely irrelevant. And on the other hand, I have to say that I agree with people who are criticizing Israel when Israelis tell them, if you don't agree with us as a queer person, then you go live in Gaza. Let's see if you can live there. They'll kill you. They're anti-gay. That's not the right answer, because we're talking about values, human rights values.
Yeah.
So I think saying that we're pinkwashing for Israel, my God, we're not talking. Israel is conformed of so many groups. I hate saying this. I know it's the go-to, but it's complex.
Yeah.
And it is complex.
It is complicated. It is. It is.
But
look. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
So we've been fighting against the government's values for a year and some. And then we're with our public in a very, very difficult, traumatic moment, trying to get the pieces together. And when we open our mouths, we get shut down by people calling us pinkwashers.
Yeah.
We can't even move an inch. And at the same time, when demonstrations from across the seas are using gay flags there, we're getting the hit here from the far right. Yeah. So we're kind of in the middle, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, we're like, whoever's willing to hear a complex answer is more than welcome to it.
Yeah. So my immediate follow-up question for this is like, look, I don't expect much from uber conservatives, right? They didn't turn on anybody, right? It was there. They've been saying it for 2,000 years. I don't know, whatever, right? Like it's a perspective. But I have to admit that I am, and I imagine that my level of befuddlement is not close to yours because you're living it, of like the failure of the global left in this particular question, right? In other words, of how can we actually, like, how is it possible? I mean, I have some whatever, but how is it possible that of things like pinkwashing Hamas, we'll call it. I don't want to name. It's not about organizations or whatever, but like Like, how is that even? I don't I don't understand it, and I can't imagine what it does for you know for people in the world who share an identity, right? I yeah, please help me understand that, how you're dealing with it. What is it doing, the conversation, and just being.
I think that it's been a heartbreaking situation for us. You know, we don't do our work in a vacuum. We, as an organization, as a community, are always trying to build bridges with other organizations and other communities so that we can all work together to lift everyone up. And very quickly after October 7th, we saw ourselves and our community tossed to the side. You know, I, one of my most favorite events that I did for more than a decade was an Iftar Shabbat, a break fast for Ramadan with our Muslim, queer, and ally community and JQ coming together to break bread, to break the fast, and come together and hear stories. And there were often times where the conversations were heated for different opinions, but there was the civility and the ability to come together, break bread, and learn from each other and hear each other. And all this bridge building work that was done for years seems to have just evaporated for many of us in the Jewish community, and certainly that's what we're experiencing here within our own space. Many partners that we had that we would have worked to bring programs to teens across the community basically were like, no, we're not going to work with you. Like, it doesn't fit our values. And I'm like, what are your values? We seek diversity, inclusion. We seek making sure everyone feels seen and heard and honored, even if they have a different political opinion. What are your values? But they're not even open to the conversation. And that has been a very shocking and jarring thing for me and the leadership within our community. And it was, I have to say, like, really, again, very heartbreaking to experience that reality.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a lot of extreme polarization trickling down from the government and from the main media channels down to the public. And like I've said, it's been happening for a long, long time. But come the aftermath of October 7th, there have been so many initiatives that are coming up, and you won't believe this, but most of them are coming from reservists or just soldiers that were injured and lost a limb and are now forming an organization that the entire intent is we need to stay together. We need to talk about differences. Don't let the media get to you. And they're fundraising for mass events of panels of people who don't agree and speak to each other politely. We're trying to re-educate or actually rebuild a muscle of not agreeing yet respecting each other and wanting to be together. It's kind of a joint destiny. We need to find a path, because if we don't, it's going to hit another burstone. I mean, the way we're trying to look at October 7th is kind of take something from it is we must be together. We were so polarized coming week 40 of the struggle against of judicial U-Haul. We were close to like milchemet achim. We were so there. There was so much violence in the streets. Yeah, between, like, we were calling cousins against cousins from within the Jewish public in Israel. Very scary. And then somebody from the outside took advantage of that time and harmed us all, and that brought us all together. And now we're bickering again. And we're trying to find the blame within. And if we don't learn from it, and that's all, everything that's happening right now is really working towards that. Everything except politics. Politics is horrible, and they're still polarizing us.
Yeah. So thank you for that, for both of you. So I'm curious. I do want to shift a little bit now, because we talked, a lot of it was so far, we talked about community and identity and belonging and external pressures and the different fractures internally. And I'm curious for a second to shift gears to talk a little bit about two parts, because we are coming up towards the end of our hours, sadly. But which is why I'm going to lay it out now this way. Like the Jewish identity component for you, how does that inform your work? That's one side. Because I think that's incredibly important for people to hear. And the other side of that is, how is the Jewish community, Hila, again, like, it's a bit different, so I'm hesitating. Like, the Jewish community in Israel is like, that's just Israel, right? But for the sake of this, the Jewish community responding and supporting, and what else can be done? So basically three things: Jewish lens in your work, how does that inform it? What does that look like? The Jewish community and its role, and what else can be done and what should be done.
I mean, I was raised here in Los Angeles, Jewish day school, Camp Ramah, U.S. by pilgrimage. Like I was raised in a Jewish bubble of like community, which was a beautiful thing. I had amazing Jewish role models. I did not have any LGBTQ role models growing up. I did not have any LGBTQ Jewish role models growing up. I had this sad unintentional message delivered to me that I didn't have a place in the community. It was a struggle for me for many years when I tried to seek community when I came out and felt like I couldn't turn to my Jewish community and couldn't reconcile those pieces of my identity. And my life's work has been based on the fact that I want to transform our community so that the youth in our community don't feel that they have to make a choice between Judaism and their queer identity, that they can have both and that they can celebrate both and they can thrive in both. And I believe that the work of JQ not just creates safe space for queer Jews, but also a lot of our work is advocating for systemic change within the Jewish landscape, and by using the resources of our remaining role models to go out into the community to be those role models for the youth in our community at large. It's very systematic, I understand, but the values I was raised with are what guide me in my pursuit of transforming the Jewish community, because I was raised in these very values-driven youth movements of the Jewish community in North America, where, you know, B'Tselem Elohim, we are all created in God's image, or Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness, or any number of values about leaving the world a better place or being inclusive and not leaving anyone behind. And that really, to me, it's not unique to me. Many of the community members, or most of the community members that find themselves entering into JQ, whether or not they are religious or not, affiliated with a synagogue or not, the values of what they were raised with is what's guiding their involvement. And that type of language is so easy to articulate to the Jewish community at large when trying to transform and change hearts and minds or shift opinions. And so, like that, it's very values driven, and it's a very successful, way of looking at it in terms of actualizing change.
Thank you, Hila.
I'm so immensely jealous right now. No, I am, Asher. I'll say why. I'll explain why. It is true, just like you said before. I live in Israel. It is the Jewish state. Everyone around me is Jewish, so kind of the Jewish identity dissembles. It's like crumbs around. Yet, the religion aspect that I was grown up with was only taught to me that I am irregular, that I do not belong, that there's a problem with me from the Orthodox community and all the perceptions of the Jewish Jews around. And that was really shoving me outside. I was for years calling myself an atheist because that God does not accept me. So I'm not even going there. And I think something shifted for me 7 years ago when my girls were born. And I wanted to give them values, and I wanted to give them family traditions, and I didn't know where to go to look for them. So I started lighting candles on Friday evening when we're having Friday dinner.
Yeah.
And then we started talking about our hopes and dreams over that dinner. And then we started talking about candles. What did they mean? And just through that, I started to find the beautiful things about tradition. But that's in barracks about me. I think in a whole, when the Orthodox Jewish community rules over the way Judaism looks in Israel, the gay community is pushed out. So our perception in large, and of course there are people who are Jewish and they are Orthodox and they settle that identity, but in a general sense, we do not feel a part of the religious community. And we can look at who are the religious leaders that are around us. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, people who are, to say the least, not our biggest fans.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's horrible. So that's how we perceive it. So not only do we not have a sense of, I do not have a sense of being Jewish, I have kind of a setback, or I'm kind of reluctant from getting close to my own religion, basically. And it's something that we're trying to work with today. So we have a lot of work that we're doing with the Reform community that's actually giving us a way to look differently and to look at the value. So I really am jealous. I swear to God.
Swear
And
to
I
God,
wish
you
we
don't
would.
believe in. No, it's joking.
No, now I do. I think it's
Okay, I just
different. It's just
yeah,
it's so different to be that they're forcing values on us that
yeah,
we don't believe in while telling us that we are not in the norm and don't belong. It's a
yeah,
very different sensation.
yeah,
Um, but I do feel like I have to say this is gonna sound weird, but the first time that I stepped in a synagogue abroad, I felt a part of something. And I feel like that part of something, just like we spoke before about communities saying during times of crisis we connect. There's something something that grew inside all of the gay organizations in Israel when we started seeing the protests abroad, and we saw what's going on in the gay marches, and we saw what's going on with the Dyke March in New York. That was just, we couldn't believe what we were seeing. And it felt like we need to be more connected. It feels like now I truly do understand you, and I really do feel Jewish now. It's not even a matter of choice. It's a matter of values and what connects us. So it's kind of it's reality, smack of reality.
So Hila, I totally understand what you mean. I think we're very privileged in North America. The conservative, reform, reconstructionist movements outside of the Orthodox space, having them for generations impacted our sense of identity as a Jewish community. There's critical mass within those communities that we were never sort of like these fringe pieces outside of Orthodoxy, not at least in my lifetime. And even my
yeah.
parents' lifetime, it's a gift of like being able to see our Judaism through multiple lenses and not seeing someone as more religious or less religious, but differently religious. And it's a
But even
gift.
in the Orthodox, Asher, even in the Orthodox community now in the States, there's baby steps, baby steps.
Yes, of
But
course.
we're seeing the beginning. We're seeing the beginning of it. I have to give a shout out to my rabbinic alma mater who recently, who has a stance on this. It's YCT. They recently ordained a student, and it generally has done a lot of work in grassroots to kind of move in a much better direction. It is an Orthodox organization, so by design they move slowly, but they're moving. So I just feel um, because I share this side of the equation, I'd say, of how do we make Judaism meaningful and what's the word I'm looking for, accessible to as many people who want it as possible. I'm excited to celebrate the little wins, and that will bring me to the little, just to close out this hour, which has been really I'll admit, moving and very interesting and educational for me as well. If you want to, each share, just so we end on this positive, because it's so dark and difficult these days, like one thought of hope that you have in your own work or in general, that I think would be a great way to conclude our hour.
In working as a Jewish communal professional in the United States, kind of like one of the sort of big, um, almost like unstated mitzvahs is when relationships come out of the work that you do, and we're able to foster a possibility of a future Jewish family. And the amount of community members in JQ that find each other and are able to celebrate themselves and build a Jewish life and feel a sense of community gives me hope. And I am witnessing so many of our community members have children now, whether it's gay men doing surrogacy or there's so many ways to do it nowadays. I won't get into it, but to see so many families building their families with new children, it's not something I saw when I was in my 20s coming out as I never thought it was a possibility. And I think that while as if you are an LGBTQ community member, sometimes it feels like our march towards civil rights and equality and making sure we have an equal seat at the table feels like a very slow, drawn out march. I have seen a lot of change, and I do think we have a lot more work to do than not. And I think that that is sometimes not understood outside of our LGBTQ community. I do feel that we are moving in the right direction. Sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back, but we are moving in the right direction, and I'm very proud of our community. And for those that are interested in helping our cause, I will tell you that the LGBTQ community in general is very underfunded. So please support the work of the Aguda, JQ, any LGBTQ organization, and do it from a position of Jewish values, of seeking a better tomorrow for the next generation and the generations forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Asher. Hila?
I think I'd speak a bit more generally, even as a part of the liberal community of the world, because I think everything that we're experiencing is a sense of madness and people getting lost. Some of them by goodwill or just going to extreme places, and some just because they have really, really closed minds. But I have to say that the main thing that I'm seeing, and I am the eternal optimist, I will not apologize for that. I do see people rallying up to their values, and that's inspiring. I haven't seen this amount of civil engagement, not in Israel for sure, but I've been hearing a lot from my friends in the States, and everybody's talking about how much the community is really waking up and really standing up for each other. And I think that's the right way to go, to fight anti-Semitism, to fight conservative restrictions, to make a better future for all of us. And I see that happening. And I think never in the history, not in the history of the gay community, even the first rallies starting from Stonewall, that was a traumatic, bad event. So the worse they hit us, the better we become. And I think as Jewish people, we've experienced this so many times in our history. We need to keep our heads high. We need to remember that we have the power and we're rallying. And once we're rallying, we're golden.
Beautiful. Hila, Asher, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Z3 Project podcast. I am really grateful for the work that you do and for the time that you've given just even out of your busy days to have this conversation. And really, thank you for your time and for all that you do.
Thank you for having us.